Why didn't you answer the question last night during the debate about who won the 2020 presidential election?
Here's the simple reason. The media is obsessed with talking about the election of 4 years ago. I'm focused on the election of 33 days from now.
J.D. Vance may be interested in moving on, but a newly unsealed filing from the special counsel is keeping Trump's increasingly desperate plans to overturn the 2020 election very much in the spotlight 34 days before Election Day as voting is underway in 29 states. Trump himself responded tonight on Truth Social, writing, "Democrats are weaponizing the Justice Department against me because they know I am winning, and they are desperate to prop up their failing candidate, Kamala Harris." The DOJ pushed out this latest hit job today because J.D. Vance humiliated Tim Walz last night in the debate. The DOJ has become nothing more than an extension of Joe's and now Kamala's campaign. Joining me now are Tim Miller, writer-at-large at Bulwark, and Charlie Sykes, an MSNBC contributor and columnist. Gentlemen, here we have it. This is how you explain it away. Tim, this is the weaponization of the Justice Department. Never mind that Judge Tanya Chutkan is an independent federal judge. This is all Joe Biden's master plan. Your thoughts?
Amazing how weaponization works, isn't it, Alex? I mean, they're going after Hunter Biden and Eric Adams and Bob Menendez just to throw us off the scent, I think. I don't know. Look, we know that this is ridiculous from Trump. To me, I think that the most interesting thing that we learned in the filing is just how much Jack Smith has about Donald Trump's behavior on the day of January 6th. And I think the January 6th committee did such a great job that, you know, some of us, I didn't know how much more material would be out there. Just kind of scanning what we've seen so far, knowing what Trump was, what he was watching on his phone, like as the riot was occurring, what the context was of when he sent out the Mike Pence should have the courage tweet, the fact that people told him about the threats to Mike Pence and that he didn't care. I mean, there is even additional information here added on top of the already damning stuff that we learned from the January 6th committee. And so hopefully, you know, between that and what we saw from J.D. Vance last night, kind of continuing to keep the story in the news as it should be, you know, by refusing to say that Donald Trump lost the election, it can be something that is injected into the public debate in a way that, a certain demographic of people, probably not the viewers of this show, but a certain demographic of people, hasn't been top of mind.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie, there's the reality of how damning this is for any former president, but the fact that this person is running again, that election day is in 33 days, I've lost count, and he's out there saying this, let's play the sound of his, his level of confidence about the coming election. Do we have the sound? Can we play it?
Trust the process this time around.
I'll let you know in about 33 days.
Process, Charlie, I'll let you know in about 33 days. That is not what you want to hear from the guy who has a 160-page, who is the subject of a 165-page filing detailing his desperate measures to subvert democracy. I wonder if you think this matters to voters.
Well, we're going to find that out. But you know what? You're going to be hearing a lot more of this because this filing by Jack Smith is a reminder of what Donald Trump did, his criminal conspiracy, his frauds and his deceit and his reliance on violence. But it's also a warning because Donald Trump intends to do it again. And I think that is one of the reasons why this is, really on fire. But also, and you were mentioning just the juxtaposition of the story that the news gods gave us today. With what J.D. Vance said last night, because Jack Smith's filing explains why J.D. Vance was on that platform last night and not Mike Pence. And it is precisely because J.D. Vance is willing to do what Mike Pence refused to do. And the dramatic takeaway I have from reading this 165-page document is the incredible pressure that was put on Mike Pence, all of the threats, all of the cajoling, all of the lies that were told to and about Mike Pence. And then that decision that Mike Pence made that for the first time as vice president, he was not going to do Donald Trump's bidding. He's gone now. He has been excommunicated by Trump world, and J.D. Vance is there in his place. And I think this is what we ought to focus on, is that J.D. Vance last night with his non-answer really confirmed that, look at the narrative of how Donald Trump tried to overturn that election and the role that Mike Pence played. And the reason that Mike Pence is not on that ticket, but J.D. Vance is on that ticket. So one of the things that I think that Jack Smith has done is he has taken the whole January 6th story out of the memory hole that it has been in for the last few weeks, and he's placed it right in front of the voters. Whether or not they're going to consider this old news, we don't know. But the details in this report are dazzling. The narrative is clear, it is compelling, and it is written in such a way that I think non-lawyers can go through it and ask themselves, how is it even conceivably possible that Donald Trump could be president of the United States again? It is a remarkable story, and it is a remarkable reminder of the stakes of this election.
Yeah, when we talk about the relevance of the 2020, the Capitol riots, Tim, it's often seen, as I think Charlie so rightly points out, as something that happened in the rear view. But there is a new level of urgency when you see just how much of a supplicant J.D. Vance is to Donald Trump. I mean, the juxtaposition of his comments last night, Tim Walz saying, where is the firewall? And then this report, honestly, I don't even think you need to read the report. It's just a reminder that, like, oh, yeah, that guy tried to steal the election, and the only guy that stood in his way is now gone. I just wonder if our calculation about how much this matters, how much it's an urgent matter for voters, changes a little bit. Maybe if it's just on the margins, given, the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I was a lot there. I mean, look, the Jim Comey letter, for example, that was old news too, and it changed things on the margins. Won't know whether that was the decisive thing that happened in 2016, not to trigger anybody, but there are late-breaking deciders. We've seen this in both of the 2016 and 2020 elections. People that don't really like either candidate decide really late. It's a small group of people, but it can be a decisive group of people. And I just think as far as the forward versus back element to this, just two things quickly. One, the thing that I was frustrated didn't get mentioned last night with in the exchange with J.D. Vance was it isn't just a backwards looking thing, because J.D. Vance's boss wants to pardon the perpetrators of the 20 who are in jail of the 2020 riot. So it is a forward looking thing. It's part of their agenda. It's a key part of their forward looking agenda. Donald Trump talks about it all the time. And secondly, I think as Charlie very astutely points out, like this is an ongoing effort. Looking to the 2024 election, I talked to Jim Messina for the Bulwark this morning. He's doing a super PAC called Democracy Defenders. He's working on. You would be astonished at how much effort is going in right now to gum up the works in all of the key swing states by Republican officials who are trying to learn lessons from what happened in 2020. So, this is absolutely a forward-looking issue, not a backwards-looking one.
Charlie, for the, handful of voters who are maybe former Nikki Haley supporters or just Republicans who need to be reminded once more why they should not be voting for Donald Trump, do you think it would be effective for Vice President Harris to talk about this in whatever way legally she is allowed to on the campaign trail?
Yes, absolutely. And I think she will. In fact, tomorrow here in Wisconsin, she's going to be at an event with Liz Cheney. And I'm guessing that this issue is going to come up. And it will be aimed, I think, at Republicans, wavering soft Republicans who have to look at this and say, do we want to go through this again? Do we really want to have another replay of all of this? And especially when you have to confront the evidence that Donald Trump actually was leading a conspiracy that would have resulted in vaporizing tens of millions of votes, including the votes of millions of Wisconsinites. That part of the plot was to have Mike Pence actually gavel in Donald Trump as the winner of the election, accepting the fake electors. When people have to confront that, I really think that there's going to be a sliver, who knows how much of the electorate, that is going to say, okay, we may not like all of Kamala Harris's policies, but this is beyond the pale. This man is not fit for any office of public trust, much less being returned to the Oval Office.
Tim Miller and Charlie Sykes, guys, it's great to have your perspective on this. Thanks for your time tonight.